This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Got CBD in your kitchen or bathroom cabinet? CBD stands for cannabidiol, and it's found in all kinds of products from lotions to lollipops. How effective is it in treating common ailments, even diseases? We'll talk with a doctor at Harvard Medical School about CBD and answer your questions, too. That's later. Now, CBD comes from the hemp plant, a crop that farmers in many states are growing, now that the federal government has relaxed restrictions on it. Coming up, we'll find out more about the resources available to help Connecticut farmers interested in growing hemp. But first, joining me now in studio is Patrick Scahill, science and environment reporter for Connecticut Public Radio. Patrick, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Lucy.
And you can join us, too, 860-275-7266, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. I mentioned farmers are now interested or in the process of growing hemp. When you've been reporting on this in Connecticut, why now?
Why now? So that is a great question. I think there might be two ways to answer that. One being there are some really, really strong economic incentives right now to grow hemp. And two, legislation both at the federal and state level is currently allowing it. So let's sort of break those down. So the first one is economic. You've probably heard about CBD products. They are kind of like literally everywhere right now. And there's a lot of money here. The Connecticut Farm Bureau Association is estimating that 1 acre of hemp could produce somewhere between $37,000 and $150,000 in profits if you are cultivating this hemp for CBD oil. A recent article in the New York Times also said that the CBD industry is predicted to be about $16 billion by the year 2025. So there's a lot of money there. I think a lot of farmers in Connecticut, and we're going to hear from one soon, have historically looked maybe at other crops as kind of anchor cash crops to offset maybe other losses in their fields. Tobacco, obviously, in Connecticut historically was that crop. That is a market that's seen a lot of fluctuation with prices. It's a market that health-wise, obviously, is going out of vogue. So farmers are looking for other crops to provide that money to stabilize their fields. And I think hemp is that. So that's the financial portion of it. The other portion, and we're going to get more into this later, I think, is the law. So in 2014, the federal Farm Bill essentially created pilot programs that states could sign up for where they could grow hemp under very, very strict conditions. The 2018 federal Farm Bill sort of legalized hemp a little bit further. And then in May, the Connecticut legislature signed off on its own pilot program for hemp. So the law is there. The financial incentives are there. So a lot of farmers in the state, and so far about 60, more than 60 actually have signed up for this pilot program, are saying, we want to get on board this hemp thing. We want to do this. We want to try this out. We want to see how it works.
So when you say legalize hemp, that's for commercial growing only?
That is for commercial growing only. There are a lot of regulations. The state spells them out very well on their website. This is something that you do need to go through a permitting process to do. You have to abide by certain requirements demonstrating both how you're going to sell the product. You have to keep logs as to how you grow it. And then there are restrictions for where you can grow it, setback requirements, acreage requirements, things like that.
So when we talk about hemp, it's in the cannabis family. So how is it different from marijuana?
Right. So this is a question that a lot of people have. So hemp and marijuana are both types of cannabis plants. The difference is kind of complicated, but in simple terms, boils down to sort of the chemistry of the plant. So a hemp plant has a chemistry that contains a compound called CBD, or cannabidiol. It also contains THC, which is the psychoactive component of marijuana, but it contains that in very, 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 very low levels. So one of the things that Jerry Berkowitz, he's a professor at UConn, has told me, if you went into a greenhouse and there were a bunch of hemp plants in there, yes, you could smoke them. It would not do anything, though. The THC levels are so minute that they are not going to produce any psychoactive effects. So hemp is cultivated for CBD. Of course, hemp, historically has been used for many, many other things too. The fiber is something that's been used in canvases for sails on ships. You can use it in brake pads. You can use it as foundations for buildings. You can use it for rope. You can use it for sneakers. All sorts of stuff.
Sounds like a wonder plant, Patrick.
Well, it's certainly being marketed that way right now. So
Patrick Scahill is with me. He's the science environment reporter for Connecticut Public Radio as we look into this growing industry in Connecticut, hemp. You mentioned local farmers that are interested in getting permits to grow this particular plant. One of them is joining us now by phone, Ed Kasheda, who's president of Kasheda Farms in South Windsor, Connecticut. Ed, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you for having me.
We heard Patrick explain, historically, tobacco was the crop grown here in the state of Connecticut. This is something that your family has deep roots in.
Yes, it is. Tobacco has been king in the Connecticut Valley ever since the late 1800s, and we are a century farm, and we've been growing it on our farm since 1905.
And so how has, demand changed? How have you seen it change over the years, Ed?
Well, the greatest thing that I witnessed was when they started a process called homogenization. And that's, basically our tobacco, broadleaf and shade, was for cigar, wrapper, and binder. And then through this homogenation process that was introduced, they were able to take leaves that weren't Class 1 Grade A leaves and make a sheet tobacco out of it that would, basically do the same thing. And this caused the market to crash and lessen the demand to the point where the government had to step in and form the Conmass Tobacco Cooperative, in which the government would literally purchase the tobacco from the farmers and just store it until there was a need. Then we had our resurgence, probably 15 years ago, where you saw all the actors and famous people starting to smoke again. The price of tobacco skyrocketed, and they did buy up all the tobacco that was in storage over the years, over 1 million pounds from the Conmass Co-op. And like I said, that lasted for about 3 or 4 years, and then the demand leveled off again. And now we have some offshore customers to where there's, again, a slight demand, and the price is livable. You're not going to get rich, but I've seen so many ups and downs with the price of tobacco that it's really unstable. And the thing that concerns most tobacco growers now is the social unacceptability of the smoking. We have an active program here in the United States, but these other countries that we sell to, they're getting on the bandwagon for anti-smoking campaigns also. So this is, like Pat said, you're looking for something to keep agriculture alive, and nobody likes to work, at a loss, so hemp definitely has to be explored.
So tell us about this partnership. So in South Windsor, you're still growing tobacco, but now you're growing how much hemp?
We have a 20-acre pilot plot in which we have a consortium with Incredible Edibles, Jarmac Farms of Enfield, and the consortium is open to any farmer in the state of Connecticut that is interested in growing. We would like everybody to join on board. We have the Yukon Extension Service, Connecticut Valley Lab, and the state of Connecticut. They're totally behind this test plot. So any farmer in the state of Connecticut is welcome to call. And the great thing is that all of the information derived, we're all on a street that we've never been on before. All of this information that is gathered for growing this year's crop will be available to any Connecticut farmer that will need it in the future. It is a great learning process.
Ed, I'm curious because you said that this is new for many of you. So tell us, what have been the upfront costs, and where do you even get your seeds from?
Well, the seed, number one, by contract, first step, we had to get a permit from the state of Connecticut, which involves a criminal background check, fingerprinting, and they do an extensive background check. Anybody with any felony record or whatnot would not be able to get a permit. Then after that, comes the seed. You must have certified seed, hemp seed, to grow and to get a license. Our seed, was contracted by Incredible Edibles. It's kind of expensive. It goes anywhere. It's between $75 to $1 a seed, depending on what variety you plant. There are feminized plants. We chose to go with non-feminized. And this is a case where you have to literally go through the field by hand and eliminate the male plants so they do not neutralize the female plants.
And so tell us more about that. So why do you need to have non-feminized plants?
Well, like I said, this is what we chose. The Jarmac operation in Enfield, they had purchased feminized seed, in which you still have to go through and check, because the pollen from one male could spoil the whole 20 acres. And you have to identify these plants at an early age before they start pollinating and destroy them. We are going for the CBD oil on our operation, along as the Jarmex. And with this, the plants, if they were to be neutralized by the males, they would not flower and produce the pods from which we get the oil. This is a very, very labor-intensive crop, similar to tobacco. It cannot be done, if you're going for the CBD oil, it cannot be done by machine. This all has to be done by hand, and it takes an army of people.
There's certainly risk involved when you're a farmer. How concerned are you with, there is so much demand today for CBD. So many states are now on board. Even Canada, European countries are growing for CBD. I'm just curious, what some of your concerns are moving forward, Ed.
Well, first of all, the main concern is, being a farmer, we are certainly rely on pesticides and herbicides. Right now in the state of Connecticut, there are no pesticides or herbicides that are cleared for use on hemp. And it is susceptible to powdery mildew. Weeds are your enemy. Like I said, we needed the rain that we got right now. But after this, you're going to have to go through with heavy cultivation, manual hoeing of the plants. And there are so many unknowns. Like I said, you have to be almost an expert to identify the male plants from the females. We had experts here yesterday provided by Incredible Edibles, and we said right now at this point the plants are too young we found female plants which we could identify, but the males are not far enough along. They have to get to a six level height on the branches before they're easily identifiable.
Coming up, we're going to talk more about there are some resources to help local farmers. We're going to be hearing from Bonnie Burr, who's Assistant Director and Department Head with the Cooperative Extension System at the University of Connecticut's College of Agriculture. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, Ed, about the cost of these seeds, and they're hard to come by. They're $1 a seed. So how many hemp plants do you expect to grow on 20 acres?
Well, we planted in the neighborhood of about 100,000 seeds for germination in the hothouses, and we've almost exhausted all of them. So it takes quite a bit. It's quite a large investment.
Yeah, and I would just add too. I was out there last week on Wednesday when some of these seeds were going in the ground, Lucy, and Ed was talking about the amount of hand labor that's required. We're talking about tens of thousands of seedlings, tiny little sort of couple inch high seedlings that have to be delicately placed in the ground, literally spaced inches apart over 20 acres. It is hours and hours, hundreds of hours of man labor, and a lot of people that are needed to be out there to do this. It's a lot of work.
Ed Kasheda, I actually live in Suffield, and so there are still tobacco farms there. Seeing laborers who come and do that work, it is fairly intensive. And the fact that you have a history growing tobacco, you have the workforce that can help you do this.
Well, right now, our situation in South Windsor, we are not allowed to have a labor camp, and this is why we have so graciously and thankfully have the Jarmac family involved. They have 2 camps in the town of Enfield, and basically they are the backbone of labor for this operation.
And before we end, Ed, I'd mentioned other states are also growing hemp. Have you been talking with people outside Connecticut?
Oh, yes. I've been in touch with people from Canada, and like I said, we had representatives here from Kentucky, experts, and there's been many, many people involved. Yukon Extension is most gracious. They've done all our soil sampling before we put the plants in to get the soil ready for it. And they also have 3, if not more, experts on this matter. Jerry Berkowitz and his team are doing a great job, and we expect a lot of help from them, when it comes time to get out in the field and identifying these male plants.
Patrick, remind us again, Jerry Berkowitz's expertise at Yukon.
Yeah, so Jerry Berkowitz was actually a professor that I profiled as part of a story I did for NPR a couple months ago on Yukon offering what was being billed as, and probably is, the nation's first cannabis growing class offered to undergraduate students. And I think some graduate students were auditing the class as well. But at any rate, this was a class all about how to grow hemp, the type of plant we're talking about today. It was a ton of students enrolled, which wasn't terribly surprising, but hundreds of students did get in on this. And Jerry Berkowitz was sort of at the forefront of that and has been at the forefront of a lot of research that the university has been doing on this plant.
Well, I want to thank Ed Kasheda for joining us by phone. Again, he's president of Kasheda Farms, Incorporated in South Windsor, Connecticut, a longtime family farm growing tobacco, also now looking to grow hemp in partnership with the town of South Windsor. And also, you mentioned Incredible Edibles a few times. We're going to be hearing from the CEO of that new company in a little bit. But Ed, thank you so much for joining us today here on Where We Live.
And thank you for having me, okay? It's a great service you provide with providing this information, because I think a lot of people have the wrong idea about what's going on. This is not marijuana. We are monitored very closely by the state. The testing is being done. And hopefully, like I said, with Credible Edibles model, this is not a high. This is health that we're talking about.
Ed Kasheda again, thank you. Also, Patrick Scahill with me, the environment and science reporter at Connecticut Public Radio. He's going to stick around as we learn more about hemp and the resources out there to help local farmers grow this crop. And later, hemp produces CBD or cannabidiol oil, which is now being marketed in all kinds of products. What do scientists know about how it affects certain ailments and medical conditions? We're going to talk about all of that coming up here on Where We Live. You can join us too, 860-275-7266, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks to the federal farm bill, many states are now regulating how hemp is grown as consumer demand for CBD products makes the business of growing hemp a multi-billion-dollar industry. We just heard from a South Windsor farmer, Ed Kasheda, who's participating in the state's pilot program to grow industrial hemp. And coming up, we'll hear from the company that's partnering with Kasheda's farm. In studio with me now is Patrick Scahill, science and environment reporter for Connecticut Public Radio. And joining us is Bonnie Burr, Assistant Director and Department Head with the Cooperative Extension System at the University of Connecticut College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources. Bonnie, welcome back to the show.
Lucy, thank you so much. And Patrick, we certainly appreciate all the work you've been doing in bringing hemp out into the public so that we can all talk about it.
We'll tweet out a link to Patrick's story, his recent story on farmers growing hemp. Just look for, search for at Where We Live on Twitter. You can also join us, 860-275-7266. So Bonnie, let's learn a little bit more about UConn's efforts to help local farms. We heard from Patrick why it's important to diversify. Farms losing money. We know the dairy farms are closing. So I'm just curious about some of the questions you're getting from local farmers.
One of the things that people got very interested in was in the 2014 Farm Bill when it first was brought forward. Connecticut was one of 9 states that didn't move at that point in terms of making it a viable opportunity to start to plant and do pilot programs. Governor Lamont certainly let it be known very quickly that he wanted us to move forward, that he expected the university to certainly come forward with research opportunities, with education. And in working with the Department of Agriculture with Commissioner Hurlburt, we began learning very quickly that we needed to make sure that people were educated. At some of our meetings, we would have anywhere from 50 to 170 people that turned out. So we understood that there's a lot of curiosity about the crop. And at UConn, we just want to make sure that we can give the best possible information. You heard from Ed that there's a lot of new things coming forward with it. And our job is going to make sure that the information that they're getting and that they're using is information that can help them be more profitable.
So give us an idea of some of the questions you're getting, especially when it comes to breeding.
So one of the things people are certainly looking at, as Ed identified, is do I go with feminized plants? Do I go with clone plants? Do I go with the mixture and then pull the males out? We joke, as always, it's the females that are doing all the work, especially as we try to identify what are the crops that you're going to try to get out, the use you're going to get out. Patrick talked about the fact that there's a lot of difference in terms of what's the difference between marijuana and industrial hemp. One of the biggest things for us has been educating farmers and others, especially the others, that industrial hemp is very different. It's like comparing a Guinness to a non-alcoholic beer. There's a big, broad, range in terms of what you think you're going to get out of it, and that's the same thing with how we look at cannabis and again with the industrial hemp. So people are asking us, what are the business plan opportunities that they need to look at? That's the first thing that we say is you've got to make sure that whatever you're going to plant is going to be profitable. And then we go forward in terms of what are the growing conditions, what are best practices. And that's where we are right now with a lot of our interested people, is helping them identify, can this be a crop that I can use, to enhance my farm operation? Or is it going to be something that I'm going to be exploring for a couple of years, at a very small basis so that I can get the best practices, under their belt?
Is there a chance that when a farmer is growing a hemp plant, that the THC levels will actually be above what the FDA and others say is reasonable for a particular product?
That's a great question, Lucy, and yes, it can be. One of the things that we're very, very clear about is that you have to have certified seed. So in Connecticut, what we've said in order to help farmers get into this process as quickly as possible is that you have to use certified seed that can be on another state's list. And the certified seed helps you to identify where that seed came from. It's a very transparent process. And the consistency is what we're really concerned about. That's where we're going to be doing a lot of research at UConn, because you can say that something is, going to consistently come to a 0.3 THC. But at the end of the day, if you're not monitoring that up till it's where it starts to be the point where we're going to pick it, you can roll over the 0.3 very quickly.
Patrick.
So, Bonnie, one question that I know you've gotten a lot is probably a really, really basic one, but one that's kind of hard to answer, and that's how do we grow this plant? So this is a plant that for decades was illegal, correct?
Correct. When we take a look at how you want to grow hemp, it really depends on what market you're going to be going for. If you're out in Montana, Wyoming, where we're seeing an amazing increase in how they're growing it, they're doing a lot of field-grown hemp. If you're looking at where we have really reduced acreage, like in a population-dense state like Connecticut, a lot of our folks are going straight for CBD. And to do that, we have to make sure that, if you're going to be planting it outside, there are so many variables. You heard Ed talk about the fact that, pesticides are not, there's not a labeled use for hemp, so we have to go back, and such a tremendous amount of work that's going to be done by hand. The other area we're seeing real growth in with regards to interest is in greenhouses. So we've had a real challenge in some of our greenhouse economics in the past few years with all of the plants that are imported into Connecticut. We've seen some of our greenhouses really struggling to make ends meet. So they've started to look at hemp to see if they can start growing the indoor varieties of hemp. And that's where they can really start to get at a lot more intensive growing. They can control the water, they can control temperature. So I think that we're going to start to see more and more people, look for information on how to best what are the best varieties, first off, to plant, and then second, what are the best practices that we need to do?
But Bonnie, we heard that the seed is so very expensive, and so is that a challenge because there are so many people that are interested in growing, not just in Connecticut?
It absolutely is, Lucy. And one of the things that we caution our producers about all the way up and down the line is making sure that you're getting reputable seed. And seed has been short this year, especially the feminized seed. And when you're not able to get what we would consider a quality seed, that puts your whole operation right from the get-go at a disadvantage. So it's really going to be interesting to see how, as the market expands, the seed and the germplasm is going to be made available. One of the things that we're seeing that we're really cautious about is what we're getting for international seed. The Europeans, you identified the Europeans, the Canadians, the Chinese are chomping at the bit to see what they can do to get into this market. So we're really cautioning people to be very, very, do their due diligence when they look at seed variety and what it brings to the table.
You can join our conversation here on Where We Live. Bonnie Burr in studio, Assistant Director and Department Head with the Cooperative Extension System at UConn's College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources. Also, Patrick Scahill, Science and Environment Reporter for Connecticut Public Radio. The number to call in, 860-275-7266, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Brian's calling from Middlefield. Brian, you're on Where We Live.
Hi, I have a question about not the growing, but the processing. So, what kind of processing involves after hemp is grown, and is Connecticut working on developing facilities inside the state, or is this just going to be a crop that gets grown and exported and added value somewhere else?
A great question, Brian. Bonnie Burr?
So, Brian, that is a fantastic question. One of the things that we are hearing more and more of is what is the process. So the reason the tobacco growers were able to get in quite a bit quicker with a little bit more certainty is the fact they've got the ability to dry the flowers if we're going for the CBD for the oil. And again, we have to identify what is the product that the end run for the product that we're growing for industrial hemp. If we're looking at CBD oil, it then once it's dried, it goes in and the oils are extracted, and the oils are then moved through the processing, and then they're sold to companies or to wholesalers, which would then utilize the oil. One of the biggest concerns that our state legislature came forward with was making sure that there are economic incentives for companies to want to come to Connecticut. Senator Kathy Austin and Senator Christine Cohen did yeoman's work in making sure that these are questions that are on the table. These are things that DECD, Department of Economic and Community Development, are aware of. Again, Commissioner Hurlbert at the Department of Ag is also very much in tune with the fact that we can grow this crop, but then what happens to it? And there are some that are vertically integrated in terms of how that goes forward. You heard Ed talk about the project he's working on with Incredible Edibles. So there's still a lot of conversation about where is this going to be processed, what is it going to be made into, and how will the product be marketed.
This is where we live. Again, we're talking about how local farms are interested in growing hemp after the federal farm bill legalized hemp for commercial growing, clearing the way for states like Connecticut to oversee pilot programs. We spoke earlier to South Windsor's Ed Cacheta from Cacheta's Farms, which is in a partnership now with a new venture from the founder of Edible Arrangements. The company is called Incredible Edibles, and its chief operating officer is Ronald Reynolds, who joins us now to talk about this. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
So we're focusing on hemp and the fact that it produces CBD. And so tell us how Incredible Edibles hopes to capitalize on this demand.
Yeah, no, at the heart of what Incredible Edibles is trying to do really from the start is figure out how we can do fully traceable kind of infused superfood ingredients. And so from a botanical standpoint, hemp is such a natural extension to that. You talk about the roots of Tariq Farid with his successful history of edible arrangements, but really at the heart of this is we're really trying to build upon the kind of the natural elegance of fruit, which is where he started as a founder, and now to hemp, and then eventually to superfoods. So we can kind of really rediscover that edible and edibles can become a verb for wellness, not to make claims or to confuse consumers, but to really show that distinction between what I believe is a macro trend that people are really rediscovering these ancient foods and plants and how they're used in the body, and where we go from there. So Incredible Edibles is really trying to pick up on that broader trend and create products and powders and ingredients that can go into and be infused into food that is truly traceable and pure.
So, Ron, how did you, pick Cacheta Farms to partner with? How will that work?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're extraordinarily proud to not just Cacheta Farms, but also to be working with South Windsor Town themselves and many others, Jarmick family and others, Yukon, who's been phenomenal. So what we did really was to look around the state and just selfishly say, what are the best thought leaders and capabilities that are out there. And so given the long, deep history of Ed and his family and others, our general view was between this consortium of folks, if Connecticut was going to have pilot programs, which is really at the heart of these licenses that research is supposed to be done, we wanted to make sure that we got, as I said, the best and brightest around the table so that we could take all this information and really share it in the public domain. I think that's what probably sets what we're trying to do apart. This is really a kind of soft public-private partnership, so that what we're learning we will feed into people like Bonnie and her team and make it absolutely available for everyone. Because our general view is that although we are focused on the kind of last mile of this, of trying to infuse great, traceable, pure CBD into food, if we don't have the research, if we don't know where the market's going, if we don't know what the capacity is, if we don't have a game plan on how to extract it, which is what one of your listeners talked about, then it's not going to grow at pace in Connecticut. So we thought, given the scale and given the legacy of Tariq and what he has done in Connecticut, it seemed like if we can put all of those pieces together, we'd have a great shot.
And so what is your timeline? Again, products with CBD is very trendy now, but by the time you're selling, is this going to be an issue when there are, again, concerns about the efficacy of CBD and questions about that?
Well, we're doing actually two things in parallel. So as it relates to what's growing in Connecticut, I mean, the reality is that what's in the ground today probably won't be harvested until late September, October. As Bonnie noted, it now then needs to get dried. We are in conversations with South Windsor, as some of the other folks in our consortium are thinking about working in parallel with South Windsor and their community to possibly put an extraction facility in the town. It's a natural location given the deep, rich history of tobacco. So for what's going in the ground as part of this pilot program, we're talking about having extracted oil ready to be processed in the first quarter of 2020. So in parallel to that, we are also partnering in getting other fully traceable CBD, mostly from Kentucky right now, because Kentucky has such a long, deep, rich history, given its head start on this. So we're extraordinarily excited about what we believe can become a growing industry in Connecticut. But we're cautiously optimistic because there's a lot to learn. Bonnie talked about this. This has been off the market for 80-plus years. And to pretend that you can just turn it back on and have agricultural excellence and understand how to handle it, there will be failures. There will be other things as part of this process. And that's what we hope to both learn the good and the bad, share that, and hopefully build a broader industry and partnership with all the pieces of the puzzle.
Well, Ron Reynolds, again, is Chief Operating Officer for Incredible Edibles. Again, this is a new company launched by Edible Arrangements founder Tariq Fareed, who's a Connecticut resident. We thank Ron for joining us today on Where We Live to talk about this interesting partnership with the town of South Windsor and Casheta Farms. I wanted to go back to Bonnie Burr from UConn. You know, I'm just curious with all of the interest in growing this. I'm curious about what other university partnerships or who maybe UConn is partnering with to get the best information out there and the best research.
Lucy, one of the things that we're really excited about as a land-grant university is that we can partner with other universities in the land-grant network. We've been attending meetings. We have what's called a multi-state project around industrial hemp, and that meeting is going to be held in August. So our researchers will be going to sit down with researchers, again, from other universities who have really identified that this is an area that they want to really explore. Cornell has been doing a fair amount of work. Obviously, Kentucky. There's certainly people that have been ahead of what we're doing, but UConn recognized as soon as the Farm Bill came out that we needed to be at the table on this. And, we've got great opportunities to see where we can go from a health perspective with UConn Health and some other folks that we've got at the university.
Bonnie, one of the things that one of the words that Ron said a lot there was this idea of traceability. And I wonder if you can just maybe expand upon that idea a little bit more. So the CBD market right now is very, very large. There are a lot of products out there that are labeled as having CBD, but we don't necessarily know, A, if they do, or B, where that CBD hemp comes from. So talk more about why this idea of traceability is important and the role that is playing and what's going on in Connecticut right now.
Sure. One of the things that really became evident in 2014 when the Farm Bill came out was that this was going to be an explosive opportunity for farmers to really get into. They've been doing this, again, as you identified, in Europe and Canada. The Chinese are into it. So one of the things we wanted to make sure that we could do was adhere to what FDA saw as real needs if it was going to be a human consumable product. And so FDA is currently in the process of doing a public gathering of information. They're looking to see what are the things that people think are positive, what are the concerns that are out there. And traceability has been something that has just consistently been brought out every single time they do public hearings. They ask for public comment, is that we've got to understand, where does the seed come from? Where is the seed being planted? Where is the seed being harvested and then taken for processing? After it's processed, where is it going? So the traceability from the time we order seed to the time we receive it to the time it actually goes into a product is absolutely vital to make sure that we can understand where it's coming from and how it's going to be used.
You can join our conversation here on Where We Live, 860-275-7266. Coming up, we're going to talk more about what consumers should ask and know before buying many products that are labeled CBD. But in studio with me again is Bonnie Burr, who's with UConn, and Patrick Scahill, our science and environment reporter, talking about this interest in growing hemp for CBD. We got a question, a tweet actually, Patrick. Mary writes, she heard you mention uses for the stem of hemp plants like brake pads and rope earlier in the show. She writes, hemp is a fiber like linen, so can be turned into fabric. And she wants to know, are there any companies in Connecticut or New England investigating turning hemp into textiles?
I might defer that one to Bonnie. I would be surprised if no one is not investigating it, but I don't know. Do you know, Bonnie, the answer?
To my knowledge, we don't have anybody that's doing it on a commercial scale. A lot of people sometimes will liken it to growing flax. And again, part of the process is where can we start to really ramp up that kind of research and production to see how we can utilize the strands that are in the more fibrous varietals that are being planted. So again, research to be done to see what are the best plants, types and varieties of hemp to be grown that would best be utilized for fabric and things like that. Certainly there's opportunities. We're seeing it done with concrete. We're seeing it used, as you identified, in a variety of commercial ways. But again, it's the variety that you're planting. And so that's where the research really needs to broaden out so that we can identify, okay, if I want to make linen, a linen-like cloth, what's the best varieties to use? So certainly plenty of work to be done.
Yeah, and I do think just from a science perspective, this plant is at a very interesting crossroads right now. As Ron was saying, it's a plant that's been out of agricultural fields for decades. It's coming back in. There isn't an established body of science for how to grow it, the best type of seed, where to put it. Like, we just don't know a lot about this plant, so it's sort of a steep relearning curve that people are doing pretty rapidly right now.
Well, it is. And one of the things that people questioned was, where's the germplasm? So the federal government keeps a lot of seed and germplasm, but after it was outlawed, in one of the marijuana acts, people are questioning, where is all of that germplasm? Where did it go? Was it destroyed? So again, that's one of the things that we're having to do is reconstruct, where that seed is kept, how we're going to build up that national database again on what this product is going to be.
We mentioned the state pilot program a few times. I'm curious, with more than 60 people in the state looking to obtain licenses to grow hemp, is there a certain threshold that the state will not cross? Do we know how many are available in our state?
Commissioner Hobart has been very, very proactive in saying that if you've got a license, the ability to permit and get a license, his department is going to be entertaining those inquiries. And I think that's what's really vital, is letting the process run. One of the things that we found is, as we go forward to do research, our protocols for and things that we need to do in order to get a license are going to be different than somebody that's doing it commercially. So that's where the commissioner and the administration has been very helpful in saying, we recognize that there's going to need to be some adjustment in terms of how we permit, how we do the licenses and certifications. And so that's part of the learning process. So the more people that get in, the better we're able to explore how to have that happen.
Joseph from Wallingford called in just to recommend the website Ministry of Hemp as an informative resource for those interested in hemp growing. I'm just curious, Bonnie, before we run out of time, if people are interested in learning more about hemp, besides going to UConn, are there some good sites out there for them to check out?
I would say that Cornell is certainly doing yeoman's work. U.S. Hemp is doing some great work for us in terms of getting information out there. There's any number of places that we can recommend, depending on where your interest lies. Again, I can't stress enough that it's, what do you want to do with that hemp? How do you want to process it? What's your end game? And the other thing that we're just making sure and giving a lot of caution about is making sure, again, that you've got the right business plan in place, making sure that you're understanding the legal ramifications of how to get into this arena. So lots of places, lots of information, and if you want more, come to see us at UConn.
Bonnie Burr, Assistant Director and Department Head with the Cooperative Extension System at UConn's College of Agriculture, Health, and Natural Resources. Bonnie, always a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lucy and Patrick.
Also, Patrick Scahill, Science and Environment Reporter for Connecticut Public Radio. Patrick, thanks for your time. And again, we'll tweet out links to his reporting at WNPR.org. Thank you, Patrick.
Thank you.
This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. After the break, so what is known about the efficacy of CBD, which is found in everything from lotions to lollipops? We're going to find out after the break. You can join us too, 860-275-7266, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. CBD comes from hemp, a plant in the cannabis family, but unlike marijuana, which has a high THC level, CBD is non-intoxicating. It's popping up in all kinds of products advertised to cure all kinds of ailments. Are the claims factual? Joining us now by phone is Dr. Peter Grinspoon, instructor at Harvard Medical School, also author of Free Refills, A Doctor Confronts His Addiction. Dr. Grinspoon, welcome to our show.
Thanks for having me.
So what do we know when someone sees a product that's labeled CBD? Do we know how much is in that product and what it does exactly?
Well, somewhat. The problem is it's not particularly well regulated. So we don't know for sure exactly how much CBD is in a particular product, or if there's any CBD, or if there's only CBD in that product. So usually you want to buy something that from a place that has independent laboratory testing, where they have independent labs sort of do, spot checks and make sure that what they're marketing actually has what they're selling. So if you go to a local gas station or a local store, they might not have that independent testing. But, some of the online stores, for example, or, for example, in Massachusetts, where cannabis is legal, in the dispensaries, they're very strict. You pretty much know you are getting the CBD that they're advertising. So part A is actually getting the CBD that you're looking for. And then part B to your question, is it effective? That's the million-dollar question that everybody is trying to figure out. Certainly the enthusiasm has outpaced the science. There's very good science in animals that it helps with, pain, anxiety, insomnia. Interesting that it might help with addiction and with psychosis. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence. People swear by it, but there isn't yet a lot of good human data that it works. We're getting more data every day, but it's certainly very intriguing, the data, but there's certainly not airtight data that it works.
And the fact that there isn't a lot of data looking at the efficacy of CBD, that relates to even the questions of legality for so long, and now that things have been relaxed, at least for commercial farmers, does that play into it, Dr. Grinspoon?
Yeah, the legality is so complicated, and I like to joke that the legality might even change by the end of this conversation because it's so in flux. Different parts of our government have different interpretations of the legality. The DEA is so paranoid and misinformed about cannabis that they're just trying to keep anything cannabis-related under wraps. And, hemp and cannabis are the same plant except for how much THC, which is the intoxicating quantity of marijuana, is involved. At the same time, the FDA and the Department of Agriculture say that hemp is legal. If hemp is legal, CBD basically is legal because, if orange is illegal, orange juice should be legal. It doesn't make any sense. So you have different parts of the government saying different things. And, CBD has been a supplement. And if you're a supplement, you're basically healthy until proven unhealthy. But the FDA just approved Epilodex for childhood epilepsy. And that's a drug. And if it's now a drug is dangerous until proven not dangerous. So there's a big contradiction in their definition of what CBD is, and there's a contradiction among different parts of the government. So they're actually talking about coming up with a new regulatory framework for CBD because it just doesn't fit into any of the contradictory boxes that they have right now.
I'm glad you brought up the drug that's been approved to treat epilepsy, I believe, in certain children that have a particular disease. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, parents were desperate with these childhood epilepsy syndromes. And then, they were just desperate parents to try anything. And there was a lot of anecdotal evidence that it worked for kids. And parents would try this strain called Charlotte's Web. You can see the videos on the internet. Drastic reduction in seizures, like visible. You literally can watch these kids taking a tincture or some other formulation, and their seizures would just stop. Like literally, you could Google and see these videos. I mean, it looked like magic. This stuff is so effective for these cruel, intractable childhood epilepsy syndromes. So finally, GW Pharmaceuticals said, hey, why don't we look through the propaganda? Maybe a cannabis-based medicine will work. And lo and behold, they tested it, it works, and now they've got a cannabis-based medicine, which is really funny or ironic because cannabis, according to the U.S. government, is still Class 1 in the Controlled Substance Act, which means high abuse liability, which it isn't, and no medical utility, which obviously isn't true if you've got a cannabis-based drug that's been approved. So pretty much everybody agrees that we've got to get it out of controlled Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substance Act, both CBD and cannabis, so we can start studying these things because there's so many medical utilities.
So when people hear that success story that you mentioned related to these epileptic seizures in children, they may think, well, CBD will be able to help me with some condition I have. I'm just curious, when people are consuming CBD, Dr. Grinspoon, are there causes for concern how that might impact other medicine they may be taking or just other side effects?
Yes. Well, the main cause for concern that I would have is that people might hear that CBD cures cancer, which it doesn't. It may help cure cancer as an adjunct, and it may prove to cure cancer 10 years from now. But my main concern is that people would use CBD instead of better proven drugs. So that is my main concern. You have to talk to your doctor, and you can't use CBD or medical cannabis instead of something like chemotherapy that we know works. So that is my main concern. A more specific concern is that, the CBD does have side effects like anything else. It, for certain conditions, you should check liver tests. It can affect your liver. Not majorly, and it'll get a lot safer once it's regulated and you actually know what you're getting. But, when they do give the kids Epilodex, they do check their liver function, just like we do when we give people cholesterol medications. The main concern with CBD is that it can affect the blood level of other medications, just like grapefruit juice does, because it competes for the liver enzymes. So they're not as available to degrade other medications. So, for example, if you're on a blood thinner and you start taking CBD, you should just let your doctor know so he or she knows this, and they might want to check the level of your blood thinners a little bit more closely. I haven't heard of anybody bleeding because they're taking CBD, but the doctor should know that if you're on CBD, we should look at your level of blood thinner a little bit more closely because the level might be a little higher. So as long as everybody communicates about it, we destigmatize it so that nobody's afraid to talk about CBD or medical marijuana with their doctor. It's perfectly safe to take. It's only when people are embarrassed to talk about their doctors that it becomes dangerous.
So you talked about products that someone might be able to pick up at a gas station, but what about at a cosmetic store or at CVS where there might be a lotion that says that there's CBD in it? Is that something that they should avoid?
Well, I don't think they're dangerous per se unless you have an allergic reaction to CBD. People can be allergic to marijuana just like any plant. They could be allergic to hemp like any plant. But assuming you're not allergic, just like you're not allergic to oak. I mean, assuming you don't have an unusual allergy. The main side effect of that is your pocketbook, because I think those things haven't really been proven to work. CBD generally does have anti-inflammatory properties. So you can make a theoretical argument that if you have an anti-inflammatory property in a cosmetic, it's good for your skin because inflammation is part of what causes skin damage. But, you can make that general argument, but I don't think anybody's actually studied skin and showed that it's healthier with CBD cosmetics. So I think they're making a big leap, and I think, again, that's somewhere where marketing and enthusiasm is getting way ahead of the science. I just haven't seen any study where people have said, okay, here's the makeup with CBD and here's the makeup without CBD, and look, the skin's healthier with the CBD. So I think there's a little bit of hocus pocus there. But again, the main side effect is financial. It just costs more. I mean, you're sort of paying for nothing. But and expectations, because people get their expectations up for something magical happening for CBD, which probably isn't going to happen. We don't know yet. I don't have a crystal ball, but it just seems a little bit far-fetched. Not just the makeup, but the CBD in the hamburger and the CBD emitting pillow and the CBD in the ice cream. It just seems to be getting a little bit out of control here. But again, I think the main side effect would be financial.
Well, we want to thank Dr. Peter Grinspoon for setting us straight on some of the things we should be thinking about before we purchase that next CBD product. Again, he's instructor at Harvard Medical School. Dr. Grinspoon, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Oh, a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Today's show produced by senior producer Lydia Brown. Coming up on Thursday, we're going to focus on the hundreds of thousands of people that are turning out on the streets of San Juan to call for the resignation of Puerto Rico's Governor Ricardo Rosselló. On the next Where We Live, we're going to look at the reasons behind those demonstrations and talk to Connecticut residents with ties to Puerto Rico. That's coming up on Thursday. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks for listening.